Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 7 of the regular season for the San Jose Sharks as they took on the Anaheim Ducks and lost by a score of 3-1. And so the Sharks' season-opening losing streak gets extended now to 7 games, and once again you could try to find the positives of this one. Well, the Sharks, they played pretty well in the first period. They had a few chances. If they had a couple extra bounces, maybe they would have been up 1-0 or 2-0 after 20 minutes. This much is definitely true, the types of moral victories that the Sharks have been looking for thus far this season. However, they were a lot more satisfied with those moral victories the first time they played against the Ducks this season, back in Game 2, when they were still only 0-1-1, which wasn't a great start, but not the end of the world. But now that they are 0-5-2, the final team in the NHL that doesn't have a win yet this season, thanks to the Predators winning earlier today, it is a lot more frustrating. The Sharks are no longer going to be satisfied with moral victories, but instead with actual victories where they score more goals than the opposing team. But no matter how well or how poorly they have played this season thus far, they have yet to manage to accomplish that goal. And so that is an incredibly disheartening feeling for these players, and especially those who were here last season, who went through the really tough year in 23-24, but then saw what happened this offseason, saw the moves that Mike Grier made, and were getting more belief and excitement about what could be done this season, that the Sharks were going to be a bit better at the very least, not a playoff team, but hopefully escaping last place in the entire league. And now, even if they have been playing arguably better, honestly inarguably better than last season, the fact that the results end up remaining the exact same way anyway, 7 straight losses to open this season and counting, is obviously a very tough feeling for this team that feels as though they probably haven't made any progress. When it comes now to the first period, the San Jose Sharks, as I said, they had some chances in this. They probably could have been up by a goal or two, but unfortunately the bounce is not going their way. In the second, the only goal scored would be from Troy Terry, and that's where you could really see the frustration begin to boil over for San Jose, who then tried to really force things offensively in the latter half of this second period, which the Ducks were able to take advantage of considerably. The Sharks in their own zone caught puck watching, trying to immediately get that turnover to get things going the other way, and so they ended up leaving a lot of Ducks players completely uncovered and unattended in the defensive zone. They themselves were quite lucky to have not given up a couple of goals in that second period, thanks to Mackenzie Blackwood. He kept the Sharks alive, and it was a 1-0 game at the end of those 40 minutes. In the third, the Sharks would finally get to tie it on a power play of their own to make it 1-1, but very soon after, it was Leo Carlsson who takes the lead back for Anaheim, and then eventually it is an empty netter from Alex Killorn to finish this game off 3-1. And as you can see here, of the 3 goals the Ducks scored besides the empty netter, the other 2 were on the power play. Now I should mention that the Ducks did not have a single power play goal this season yet until this game, where they managed to put up 2, but it's not that much of a surprise, because not only has the Sharks' penalty kill been really bad over these last few games, but they have been putting that penalty kill to work way too many times. 3 games ago against Chicago, 7 power plays given up. Game after that, Winnipeg, 7 power plays given up. Game after that, Colorado, 5 power plays. And here tonight against the Ducks, it was another 6. That is 25 power plays given up over a span of just 4 games. Most teams will give up maybe 2-3 power plays in a particular game. 4 and higher is usually viewed as like a pretty bad night. The Sharks, though, that's just average. You 5-6 penalties, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter, who cares? But the Sharks are not going to be consistently winning games by continuing this march to the penalty box. It is not a recipe for success. I mean, I'm not Einstein for saying that. That is immediately obvious. It's like the oldest cliche in the book amongst NHL players. They say, well, we got to stay out of the box. Well, it seems as though the Sharks are unfamiliar with that cliche, with the amount of penalties that are entirely unnecessary that they have been taking thus far this season. And their penalty kill has not been doing enough either to bail them out. After starting the season on a perfect 11 for 11, over these last 25 power plays, they've only killed 16 of them. That is 9 power play goals given up, a clip of 60%, which is just really bad for a penalty kill. And the thing is that most of these given up power play goals have been very much identical to each other. Not the Troy Terry one, this one was kind of in a class of its own, but this Leo Carlsson goal was the same issue that they had in each of the previous 3 games, where the Sharks are opening these seams in the middle of the ice and not getting their sticks on these passes, and they're allowing for these tic-tac-toe plays where the goaltender really doesn't have much of a chance at all of picking it up. That is something that the Sharks need to be able to clean up if they want a chance of even being able to get their first win sooner rather than later, and the road trip here for the San Jose Sharks is not going to get any easier. So if they continue to take 5, 6, 7 minor penalties in every single one of these games, we'll end up matching, if not beating, the record of the Sharks losing streak to open last season. Moving on to the players to talk about, there were a few swaps through the lineup, even a substitution as well, but in the top line we did have a change. Granlund and Toffoli joined by William Eklund. So after the injury against the Winnipeg Jets, he didn't play that game. He came back in the previous one against Colorado, and he ended up taking up a spot on the second line, and I had originally thought that that was a move by Warsofsky to try and spread out the offense. I don't know if he has gone back on that simply because it didn't work in that singular game. It's up to him, but ends up Eklund back on the top line, and I would say it worked out decently well. Obviously, this line doesn't actually end up scoring. There's no even strength scoring tonight for the San Jose Sharks, but Eklund himself, I thought, had a really spectacular game. Once again, he was the Sharks' best forward, and I don't think it was necessarily that close. He continues to dominate a lot of the times, not always. I will say it's not as though it's every single shift, but a lot of the times when he's working in the offensive zone, he's doing some really, really impressive things. Obviously, it's not ending up leading in goals or anything, but eventually, hopefully, the dam will break here for Eklund because he's been playing at an extremely, extremely high level, at least by his perspective. When it comes to his centerman, Mikael Granlund, it's kind of like last game against the Colorado Avalanche, where I thought he was pretty good. He had some really, really strong shifts. As an offensive zone move where he puts the puck through Ryan Strom's legs. The defensive zone coverage there, I can't remember if it was the first or second period, where he pretty much entirely single-handedly prevents a goal against right in front of the net, right in front of Mackenzie Blackwood. He is definitely one of the probably highest ceiling players on the San Jose Sharks at this point in terms of skill. Very, very skilled, talented player. He didn't necessarily put it all together here today. I thought he was still one of the Sharks' better forwards for sure, but a couple of small steps below someone like William Eklund, but I was still relatively impressed with what he did. The problem here, if you want to call it that, on this line, I would say, is kind of Tyler Toffoli, because while Eklund and Granlund are these high-flying players who are looking really, really impressive, this is more so just due to the fact that Tyler Toffoli isn't that type of guy, but he just kind of looks a little bit slower on the ice compared to his two line mates. And the way that Toffoli has really struck me as a player is that on a playoff team, on a team that is already very, very successful, if you insert Tyler Toffoli, you're going to make that team a lot better. You give them a 25 to 30 goal scorer, obviously they're going to be better off for it. But if you take him and put him on a team like San Jose that is already struggling to get any sort of wins, I don't know how much of an improvement he's actually bringing to the team. He gets goals, that's nice to see, but is he driving play in a positive sort of direction for the San Jose Sharks? Not necessarily. So while he might end up getting a bunch of points by the end of this season, being up there top 3, top 4 in terms of point scores for the San Jose Sharks, I want to see it actually get turned up a little bit, where Tyler Toffoli can be that dominant player, where Tyler Toffoli could actually end up at the end of the night being the player who I say was the best player on the ice for the San Jose Sharks, because while his line mates have been able to do that consistently, both Eklund and Mikael Granlund, Toffoli hasn't quite reached that level yet this year. I don't know if I can't really discount it from happening. It's very possible that it could, but right now, I don't know how much hope I have for it. On the second line, we now have Zetterlund and Wenberg with Danil Gushchin. So this is a second line that is, again, undergoing some changes. Obviously, we saw Zetterlund get dropped from the top line, and Gushchin gets promoted from the Will Smith line on the third up to the second. The Sharks continuing to just try and go through multiple iterations of these lineups to find something that clicks. Perhaps now is the time to maybe stop so much on the iteration and let things settle a little bit. There's a lot of new players on this team that haven't been playing together for a very long time, and if you continue to move things around, it's difficult to actually start to develop this chemistry. And the reason I bring up this point now is because I was actually a pretty big fan of this second line in this game. And I'll start off with Danil Gushchin, who I was somewhat critical of in the previous one against Colorado. I didn't think that was a good game for him. It was definitely his worst game of the season. While he wasn't a huge negative player on the ice for the Sharks, he also really didn't do much. He didn't have much of an impact at all. Here tonight, he really brought it back. He once again got back to what makes Danil Gushchin a successful player, which is working it well and getting pucks to the net in the offensive zone. We obviously saw him come oh so close to scoring on that crossbar post, go right along the goal line, somehow manages to stay out with the psychic powers of Lucas Dostal. Unfortunate that Gushchin was not able to score there. but he had multiple other really solid chances on that, maybe not of the highest grade variety, but still really solid. He pushed pace forward, and while he wasn't as good as someone like William Eklund here tonight, you could make the argument that he was at the very least a top 3 player for the San Jose Sharks in this game. When it comes to his 2 line mates, I also thought they've looked pretty decent. Fabian Zetterlund didn't have the most flashy game, I would say, but one of the major issues that I've had with him this season is that even in the small areas, he hasn't been doing all that well. Here tonight, I actually thought he turned things around. I thought he had a lot of very nice plays here tonight, even if they don't necessarily appear on the score sheet, obviously, since the Sharks did not score an even strength goal. But for instance, on that Danil Gushchin 2-on-1 where he gets this nice pass from Alex Wennberg, it was actually all set up by a very, very slick but small pass from Fabian Zetterlund near the Sharks' defensive zone blue line, and I was very appreciative of being able to see him do that, and I thought he had a couple of these really slick plays in this game. So the reason I had mentioned, I hope that the lines can maybe solidify a little bit so the Sharks can try and find more long-term chemistry, is because I did like how the second line worked together, and Alex Wennberg being the final player here, I think he continues to get oh so slightly better every single game. We're yet to get to that point where I've been really impressed and blown away with what Wennberg has done, but I do like his chemistry with Danil Gushchin. I think as the season, if they're actually given more games together as the season wears on, maybe that could be something slightly more long-term, because especially even when, for instance, Celebrini comes back, whether that's in like a couple of weeks or a month or whatever the case might be, to see Wennberg likely then end up back as the third line center for the San Jose Sharks. If Gushchin follows him there, I think that would even create some strong mismatches for the San Jose Sharks, and maybe they'll be able to find success then. So hopefully they manage to remain together. When it comes to the Sharks' third line, we have Dellandrea with Smith and Goodrow, and I'll start off with Will Smith, who had an extremely, let's say, interesting night. In the previous one against Colorado, he really didn't have much of an impact at all. Sure, he had that one great play where he deked out Sam Girard and had that great chance in front for Luke Cunnin, but besides that, not really much of an impact at all. Here tonight, he was definitely all over the puck, for good and for the bad. He had a ton of puck touches here tonight, which is nice to see him actually begin to get engaged with the game. He had a few really nice plays, a lot more than what he has been getting in each of the individual games in the past. A great sort of, I think, no-look behind-the-back pass to Barclay Goodrow, who then almost managed to score on that one past Dostal, so that was really nice to see. A couple of other really slick passes as well. But then, of course, we also saw the bad side. Will Smith, I thought, struggled a bit, definitely more than in some previous games on the defensive side of things. But the major issue that I have highlighted multiple times already is simply down to puck management. And I'm not necessarily talking about like him looking for an aggressive pass and it just barely getting picked off from a Ducks player. For instance, in the second period of this game, Will Smith tried a really skilled move to try and like pass it to himself, deke out somebody. It didn't work out. He ends up giving it away. I don't have a major problem with that. He has the skill to pull it off, and so maybe the next time that he goes for it, it will actually end up working out. But the puck management that I'm talking about are just the simple baseline passes that he's attempting to make, that he's just constantly fanning on over and over and over again. And you'll think, well, every player will have these sort of stone hands type of moments where they fan on a pass or something like that. Sure, a player will have that once every couple of games, maybe once a game. But for Will Smith, for whatever reason, it seems like this happens like half a dozen times every single game that he ends up playing. For instance, in the third period, he had exactly this, where he has the puck along the boards, but then he completely flubs his pass. It gets taken away by the Ducks, as it only ends up going like a couple of feet in front of him, and then it ends up with a Cody Ceci hooking minor on the essential breakaway for the Ducks player after that. This is something that Smith has to clean up in his game, and the good news is that it really shouldn't be that difficult of an issue to fix if he simply just gets slightly more responsible by being able to complete the simplest of passes. His level of play will actually shoot up by a considerable amount, but that's definitely something to look on. I don't know if he's gripping his stick too tightly or what, but these very, very simple passes need to be able to connect, and for whatever reason, Smith seems to be just having immense struggles in that area, something that I really haven't seen from any other player to that level in the past. When it comes to his two teammates, we have Barclay Goodrow. Back in the Chicago game, when Smith was originally placed with both Goodrow and Cunnin, I thought that was a good thing, because what really Smith needed was just time in the offensive zone. He didn't need guys who would be able to finish on the plays that he was setting up. He simply just needed to work in the offensive zone to build up a little bit of confidence. So I was happy with that being the case, and I'm not disappointed with it now still being the case here tonight against Anaheim. But as Smith gets more and more acclimated to the NHL, we already saw him getting a lot more strong puck touches tonight. You will want to start to pair him with slightly better players who can actually finish off some of the chances that he is going to be dishing out. Goodrow, definitely in particular, is not one of those guys. This is not to say that Goodrow had a bad game. I actually thought Goodrow was relatively solid. He was a general positive player for San Jose, even if he didn't really accomplish much for the Sharks. But it is just sort of to say that this is not a lineup that is going to work for the foreseeable future. At some point, it's going to be something that needs to change. When it comes to Ty Dellandrea, I was at least a little bit more impressed. I thought he had a bit more of an impact on this game compared to the other winger on this line, Barclay Goodrow. I thought Dellandrea played with a little bit more speed and a little bit more skill. And so in the long term, I mentioned Goodrow probably wouldn't work out in this line. Dellandrea might have a little bit more of a home there. And then we get to the Sharks' fourth line of Sturm with Cunnin, and then Klim Kostin steps in over Carl Grundstrom. So this was a fourth line that I actually thought started this game off very well. Their first couple of shifts were very, very impressive in this game, but then as the game went on, they got worse and worse, were not nearly as good as the start. And that really starts off with Klim Kostin, who comes into the lineup here after missing the last couple. He was honestly playing really, really well. His first 2 to 3 shifts, I thought he had some really smart plays, used his body quite well, defended pucks, protected it and everything like that, got it towards the net, really strong shifts. But then in his last few shifts of the game, nothing near that level of play. We started to see once again that Klim Kostin of why he is not being able to earn a consistent lineup spot, because he's just not reliable enough in either zone to be able to be a strong player. By the end of this game, he ends up with just 6.5 minutes of ice time, which is exceptionally low. And so I can't imagine he manages to hold on to his lineup spot going into next season. Obviously, he doesn't play the power play. He doesn't play the penalty kill. That's going to hurt when there was so many special teams involved in this game, but still 6.5 minutes, that is really, really low. When it comes to his two teammates, Nico Sturm, I thought it was slightly better than it has been over these last couple of games, but he still is going to be looking to return to a sort of former glory of the first 3 games of the season that he has yet to get back to. And then when it comes to Luke Kunin, similarly, I have been generally more impressed with Kunin thus far this season compared to last, but still, it was a game that I wasn't great. I wasn't all that happy about what Kunin has done. It's not as bad as it was at times last year, but I'm looking for him to also, kind of like with Sturm, get back to where he once was. Then we get to the defensive side of things, the top pairing of Wallman and Ceci, which I thought was actually kind of bad. Probably for the first time this season that this pairing as a whole was rather bad. Ceci has had a couple of bad games here or there, but usually Wallman is able to compensate for that at least a little bit. Here tonight, I thought this may have been Wallman's weakest game of the season. Now, that's not necessarily saying much because he's been by far the Sharks' best defenseman as a whole over the first 6 games. But here tonight, I thought there were a lot more defensive zone issues that he had. He wasn't really accomplishing much for San Jose offensively either. And so I'm going to be looking for a bit of a bounce back game from Jake Wallman. While it was not as disastrous as like what we have seen at times this year from Ferraro and Ruda and Benning, it was still for him, for his usual level, a good bit worse. When it comes to the Sharks' second defensive pairing for Ferraro and Ruda, the good news, I don't think they were as much of a defensive black hole possession-wise for the San Jose Sharks as they have been multiple times this season. This is mostly because of the fact that the Anaheim Ducks, I feel as though, just aren't that great of a team. They have a ton of talent there, Leo Carlsson, Troy Terry, Mason McTavish, these types of players, but them actually putting it together hasn't really happened thus far. So I think Ferraro and Ruda got to benefit from the fact that the Ducks aren't that great of a team, but even having said that, they still didn't have particularly good games, and it still remains a massive issue that there's no puck mover on this pairing. And so there were a couple of times where, once more, no surprise, they struggled to get the puck out of the zone. I don't know what the solution here is going to be. You would think that they would have made some sort of swap, yet it hasn't happened, and so we wait as we continue to just watch these two players fumble around a lot. And then when it comes to the Sharks' third defensive pairing, it is Thrun paired once again with Jack Thompson. So I was surprised to see Jack Thompson get yet another game here, not because I didn't think he was good. In fact, he was quite solid in the previous one against Colorado, and he helped Thrun out significantly, but I simply thought that Matt Benning, being the veteran player, would manage to draw back into into the lineup, but Warsofsky surprised me here. He puts Thompson back in, and he's immediately rewarded because, once again, not only is Thompson rather solid, but he was probably the Sharks' best defenseman as a whole here tonight. He has been playing in big offensive zone situations for San Jose. He's getting time in like the 6-on-5 a couple of times. He played the top power play a couple of times as well. Sometimes it was Jake Wallman, but sometimes Thompson getting those offensive zone shifts as well. The Sharks relying on him for that particular area. He picked up his first point of the season on the one goal that his first point of his career actually, on the one goal that the Sharks actually put him in this game. Defensively, I thought he was also was remarkably doing well, at least based on my expectations for him. It wasn't spectacular, but it was definitely a lot better than what I thought it would be. And so Thompson continues to really begin to lock down a lineup spot. I mean, his 2 games here thus far this season have been 50 times better than anything we have seen from Matt Benning in those first 5 games of the season. And so there really doesn't seem to be much of a pathway into the lineup for Benning unless he replaces someone like Jan Ruda, because quite clearly this third defensive pairing right now should probably become the Sharks' second defensive pairing, because they're miles better than what we have seen from Ferraro and Ruda. And I'm focusing on Jack Thompson here, but Henry Thrun I thought also had a really solid game, not quite to the level of Thompson, but still a lot better than what he was at in those first 5. And it really is crazy the amount of wonders that Thompson has done for Henry Thrun to see these improvements in his game over these last couple. Then we get to the Sharks goaltender here, Mackenzie Blackwood. I thought Blackwood certainly tried his best here tonight. There were a couple of shakier moments that make you a little bit nervous moving forward. Perhaps the reasoning for why Blackwood has at times been kind of bad this season, but it was a similar game to what he had against the Dallas Stars, for instance, where he made a lot of the really, really tough saves. The 2 goals that he gave up, I really can't put too much blame on him. The Troy Terry one, you could argue for sure that he maybe should have been able to make that save, but still not the end of the world. The Carlson one was quite difficult for him, and otherwise he made a bunch of saves for San Jose. He was far from the reason that they lost this game. Instead, it was the penalty kill. Instead, it was the lack of offense that really let them down. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Thursday. They'll be taking on the Los Angeles Kings. Unfortunately for San Jose, if they really wanted a good chance to win on this road trip, it should have come here tonight against a weak Anaheim Ducks team, because now, looking forward, they're against a pretty good Los Angeles Kings team, a pretty good Vegas team, and a pretty good Utah Hockey Club as well. So it's possible that we're heading towards a 10-game losing streak, but maybe the Sharks, finally that frustration will translate into results and they can get a victory here soon. Class dismissed.